One of the most important parts of the car is the glass surrounding you. It is how you see the world around you as you're driving. If that glass is covered in bugs, bird poop, and mud, it can really hinder your safety and make driving a whole lot less fun. We've all been in a case where we're driving in a storm and we just can't keep up with the water on the windshield. One of the best ways to deal with all those above is with a glass coating. They are not a perfect fix, but they really take a lot of stress off of cleaning the glass, maintaining it, and inclement weather. So I'm going to be going through the steps and process of how to prep and apply a glass coating. Today we're going to be using CarPro Bliss. I've used it a couple times before, had great luck with it, and I'm hoping to give you guys some realistic expectations as well as a better understanding of the process and what you can expect out of your glass coating. First step in this process is a wash. We have to get rid of all the contamination and bug splatters that are on the glass. We have to make sure that we give the glass the best chance possible for the ceramic to bond to it. Because it is a high tensile material, it requires a perfect finish in order to properly apply. And in order to get those, we're first going to start out with a hand wash, followed up with a clay glove to remove any kind of grits before we start with polish. To do that, we're going to use Glass by CarPro and a pretty stiff foam pad. The reason is glass is very hard, much harder than your paint. So we have to use a little bit of a little more aggressive approach in order to get any kind of swirls or scratches that can come in from washing or stuff getting stuck on your wiper blades. And we also have to make sure we get all of the oils off after we finish up the polishing process. So in order to do that, we can use CarPro Eraser. But what I like to use is Griot's Ultra Premium Glass Cleaner. Now these are not all the exact materials that you need, but for me personally, this is what I like to use. It helps me stay consistent in the process I do, and it helps remove variability in the prep process and application process. I recommend, if you do this often, that you have a very consistent work order that you go through, consistent products. That way you can have consistent results throughout the process, and if something goes wrong, you know where you can change it or adjust, and you can expect to know what did it. Something very important to do when you're first starting out to wash is you want to lift up the windshield wipers. They will reveal usually a streak of where things will sit on it. It'll hold minerals that are in the rain, water, dropping from trees, birds, bugs, anything like that. It likes to settle down onto these windshield wipers. So lifting them up, taking them up off the surface, will give you the best chance getting everything off that you can, and is the best way to start off the wash. Now for the wash, I'm using a very simple setup, microfiber rag that's flush on one end and a little bit more of a shorter nap on the other, just to help bite off or help you to get a lot of the bug material off. Now what I'm using as a soap is Griot's pH neutral car wash. I have had great results with it, and with this car being coated, it does need a cleanup, so sorry if it's a little bit nasty, but since it has a coating on it, I just want to make sure that I don't strip it or remove it in the process. So a pH neutral soap is the best way to go about that. And you really have to be careful too with a lot of those soaps, is since we're not doing a really water heavy wash here, since we're doing it inside, we have to make sure that we clean it up, and a lot of this will dry onto the paint or around it if we're not careful. So we want to make sure we have the best chance to remove out any variability or water stains or anything like that in the process. Now normally you would do this outside during the wash process and then you kind of bring it back in. But for the purpose of this video, we're just doing it in here, and as long as you're careful, it will not change the results. Now with this, I'm also going to be doing this to the passenger and driver side windows. Now that we finished washing, we're going to make sure we really lubricate the surface, because now we're going to start with the fun step. This is where you're going to really start to see a difference in the texture of the glass. So we have a clay mitt, and all we're going to be doing is working it along the surface, and we want to make sure it feels nice and smooth. If you're still feeling grittiness, keep going over the same spot. And with glass, you can put a little bit of extra pressure into it because it is so hard. You don't really have to worry about scratching it too much. Over to passenger side. Passenger side's pretty clean. Make sure we keep it nice and wet. Don't forget, driver side. We're going to get a quick little wet down again. Now at this point I can really feel the difference and the smoothness of the glass, which is a really good sign that we're ready to move on to the next step. And now for the purpose of this video, I'm going to be using a squeegee because we are indoors and I can't wipe it or spray it off very well, and we'll follow up with a drying towel. Now, one trick I have for the squeegee is submerging it in the bucket of water prior to using it, because you don't want that blade, rubber blade, dragging along it if it's dry. Now we follow up with the drying towel. Make sure we clean up everything we did. Don't want to leave any watermarks on anything. Now that is a really clean windshield. And what we're going to do is we're going to let it sit for about 30 minutes, come back when it's much drier, just to make sure that we give our polish the best surface possible for when we're working on it, because we don't want to be watering down our polish, because then we're not going to be getting anywhere with it, and we'll just be spending extra materials and extra time to get the result we want. So we're not going to do that. We'll make sure we do it in the best way possible. Now we're moving on to the polishing process, and the first step you want to do is make sure you tape up all around the trim that you don't want to have the polish touching or the polisher running into. Now the biggest tip I have for this is running it just a little bit proud on these edges right over here, and what you'll do is afterwards you'll just take your thumb and rail them down, and that'll really help on any little curved areas or spaces like that. Another big tip is around corners like this, don't feel like you need to pinch and pull the tape around the corners. I like to do a 3 strip method where I'll start off one corner down here and make it on this side, and then one in the middle. Usually with that, unless it's a really rounded corner, then you usually can get by with that. Now if it's a little bit rounder, you have to usually go around 6 strips to 7 strips, that's from what I've found. But the taping stage is the most important, and the first one, or I shouldn't say the most important, it's a very important stage, and it aids in the cleanup process. That way later on you won't have as much residue and all that kind of stuff to clean up. Now for polish, we're going to use Ceriglass by Carpro. Now you can use a whole bunch of other things, such as their clear cut or reflect. Any type of aggressive polish or compound works pretty well. Now with Ceriglass, from my knowledge, it usually contains less oils and makes cleanup a little bit easier, because you are working on glass, which is more finicky when you're working with applications. And for a polisher, I am using Bauer's random orbital or random action polisher. It's a 6-inch. This is a pretty entry-level polisher you can pick up at any Harbor Freight. It's really easy to get your hands on, and especially if you're new, it's really easy to work with. We will be running at a speed of 2, but to start off with the application, we're going to be going at 1 and then work our way up to 2. You can use much higher end polishers. It really doesn't matter in that regard. This is just something that's pretty entry level. Anyone can use, anyone can get. Another thing that we will be using to get to tighten up some crannies is this little air orbital random dual action polisher. It's 3 inches, and that'll help me get into little nooks and crannies, like on the side and passenger doors, driver passenger doors. These little corners up around here, without having to deal with the issue of running into a huge spot with a large throw. It'll be all over the place, and it can crimp up the tape. That's why we'll be using this. This is, I think it's $50 on Amazon. It's pretty good. Or I also have the Rupes Hybrid, which is a small random orbital polisher. Now, since we're using entry level, this is very easy to get your hands on, and it works pretty well. I've had really good luck with it. I've used it for about a year now. Couldn't be happier with it. But it all depends on what you have, what your access is to it, and you don't need a whole lot to get this job done very well. You can even use a small little hand applicator with this, such as this. It's more manual labor. It's a little bit hard, but you'll have to make sure you do this in a space where you're not outside and it's covered and in shape, especially if you are doing a hand application polishing, because it is a slower process and you don't want to dry the chemical out on the surface. So right now we're going to get started with the polish, and we're going to be starting out with a 6-inch polisher at a really low speed to apply it. Now what I will be doing is I'll be working in halves right here with it, and I will be applying 5 dots to the pad itself. Not a whole lot, about pea-sized dots. You don't need a whole lot, especially when you're working at these lower speeds. You want to use product and apply it in a very not so generous amount, but enough that make you know that you're going to have enough to do the job. And you're going to want to rely on the product itself and less so on force and tools, and just let it work. Let it do its job, and that way you have the best results possible, and you can have a consistent result as well that you can apply to another car you want to do, and that way you can repeat the process a lot easier in the future. For the sides, we're just going to be using the 3-inch dual action polisher, and we'll just be taking nice and slow along the whole thing. Because this is convertible, it doesn't have a rigid structure up top, and we don't want to be using a tool that's really strong against that, because we don't want to be sending too much vibration down inside the car, because it doesn't have as much dampening along the whole side of it. So be very careful when doing a convertible. Now, you're not going to be doing these too often. Very few cars are, but it's something as a detailer you should be aware of, that it is a little bit more fragile in the upper part of the glass on convertibles. So just keep that in mind. Now in order to get the surface prepped and cleaned off, we're going to use the Griot's cart cleaner or glass cleaner, and we're going to get it sprayed down, and we're going to get all the oils left over from the polish off. Now you want to let this dwell, because what we're trying to do is let the chemicals break down the oils the best we can, and what we're going to do is we are going to squeegee it down and nice and clean. And kind of buff off anything left over. Now for the passenger side and the driver's side door, I'm going to be switching over to the 3-inch polisher, and that requires me to use air compressor. So I won't be able to give you a whole lot of step-by-step process because it'll be so loud you won't be able to hear me. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be working around everything along here, being careful of the lip up here. We're going to be very careful along down here, but for the most part we can keep this very clean and won't have any issues with polish. But we did take up around major parts of trim that are a little bit trickier to avoid. This will be cleaned up in the process anyway from being sprayed down. We just might have to use a little bit of like isopropyl alcohol to get any leftover oils left from the polish after the glass cleaner. And this step will be repeated on the driver's side as well. And after that, I will be applying the ceramic coating to the glass. Now we're on to the final step, application. Now this step is the most important one because if you mess up this step, you're gonna have to start all over again just to make sure that it comes out right. Now with this, you're gonna need the two things. Usually what you can get is Gliss in a pack. It comes with a suede applicator cloth and a foam and softer foam block for application. Now, another thing that is very important to this process that should not be neglected is a non-linting towel. Now, this is what you're going to do to buff off the surface after you apply it, because you do not want to leave any high spots on the surface because that will show and it will really stand out. So we're going to do our best to avoid that. So application is not as difficult as you think it really is. Now all you have to do is take the bottle and slowly apply it to the suede cloth. It should look just about like that. Now here for this, with applicator pad like this size, we will do another half and just work it back and forth. And get halfway, mark it back again. Really applying it evenly. And we are going to cross hatch it because there are some imperfections in the grass, a little bit of glass, like some little chips from rocks, bugs, sorts of that nature. So we just want to make sure that we really work it in to stuff like that pretty thoroughly. Now we're just going to be applying to the rest of the surface right here. And we're just going to work this whole half. Alright, now we're going to switch over to the other side and we're going to kind of let this sweat just a bit. You might see what I mean by that in a minute, but this will start to kind of beat up a little bit. It'll look like the surface is, in a way, sweating. That's what we're aiming for, then we buff. So now let's do this side over here. I'm going to start on this way. Now, one thing to be aware of is you can over apply the coating. So what that means is you can be putting way too much on the surface, more than it can handle. And what that'll leave is these really bad high spots that will look awful, and they're really hard to get out. So in order to make sure that doesn't happen, you have to make sure you apply a modest amount for that first application. Now we're going to be doing 2 coatings of this, but I will only be showing you the first one because there is a little bit of a break period between applications. That way it kind of bonds to the surface and we don't pull the already existing layer off. Alright, it's starting to look pretty good. We're going to go to the other side and buff off what's remaining. And we're only going to focus on this side over here because we don't want to pull that off too soon. Now with this, I recommend folding the towel into a quarter. That way you can keep it fresh as you're working the surface. And we're just going to go straight up right here. You can be nice and generous with the pressure you apply. You don't have to worry about overdoing it too much. As long as you work generously. Just going to keep working the surface. Just want to make sure that we do not leave any high spots. One good test for this is if you look in from the inside and look out, a lot of times you can see things that normally you wouldn't see from the outside. And from inside, it does not look like there is anything to worry about on this side. So we're going to head on over to the other, and we're going to switch sides back over to this one. We're just going to work surface, taking off any high spots. A good little trick is that if you take your thumb and push into a little bit and work the corners, almost with your nail, which is a lot easier to do when you have this extra plush layer that you add when you fold it over. So using your thumb to kind of get into those tighter spots. And you can use your fingers as well, especially for down here. And you'll just work it in. Now, for a lot of people, they like to go either the crosshatch method. For me, it doesn't really matter too much as long as you recognize and are aware of the spaces that you've already gone over or you potentially missed. The crosshatch method is a very good one if you can be a bit forgetful and you feel like you can kind of zone out and get in that workflow kind of state. That way you're ensuring that you don't miss any spots as you're working the surface. We're going to hop on the inside, check, make sure we didn't leave any high spots. Alright, looks like we're in good shape. Now, that is the process in which you apply a glass coating onto your car. With this completes the tutorial on how to apply a glass coating to your car or truck. I hope it's informative and helpful to you in making your decision. Following this, I'll have some video of the after shots, how the glass turned out, and the hydrophobic properties added to the glass. Now, after you apply this, I highly recommend 12 hours in a garage and about 24 before really like soaking it, and 36 if you want to wash it. This is a very easy to do process. It does take a little bit of time and money to get this all applied and done correctly. Now it's been over 12 hours since I applied the last coating, That means it has had a good enough time to cure, so that way it can be taken outside and used. And I wanted to draw a water bottle out here to demonstrate the hydrophobic properties that come with these coatings. And it's so enjoyable to watch that. It just helps you to know that in any kind of inclemental weather, that your windshield is going to be nice and easy to see through. Now, maintenance is something that's very important with these types of coatings. And in some follow-up videos, I will be showing you how to do a maintenance wash on coated surfaces, what products to use on such, and the overall basics on preserving the longevity of your coatings. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and if you have ideas for more videos that you'd like to see, please comment down below and let me know what you think about this video and what I can be doing better. And